Marcus arrived at the Interstellar Concord Hall already apologizing to people who were not present. He apologized to the malfunctioning transit ring that had rotated 3 degrees too far, to the chronal buffer that insisted it was still yesterday, and finally to his own reflection in the polished alloy doors as they slid open with theatrical slowness. He had negotiated ceasefires, tariff corridors, and once an argument between two methane-breathing cousins over asteroid inheritance. But nothing had prepared him for being late to the most important summit of his career. The hall was full, not mostly full, not politely crowded, completely, offensively full. Every delegation sat in its assigned tier, bodies and appendages arranged with diplomatic precision. Some floated, some perched. One delegation appeared to be a collective mist wearing jewelry. Hundreds of eyes, lenses, and sensory nodes turned toward him in perfect unison, like a cosmic classroom catching a student sneaking in after the bell. Marcus froze, one foot still hovering forward, briefcase clutched like a shield. His mind ran through options with increasing desperation. Retreat was impossible. The doors had sealed behind him with a sound that suggested final judgment. Standing awkwardly against the wall was a clear violation of protocol. Speaking without seating was unthinkable. He scanned the hall, praying for an empty chair, a forgotten stool, even a loose crate marked ceremonial only. There were none. At the center dais sat Empress Selene of the Kier Dominion. She appeared at first glance almost human. Tall, composed, her posture effortless in a way that suggested gravity itself had learned manners around her. Her skin carried the warm tone of a sunlit world, her expression calm, observant. Only her ears marked the difference. Long, elegant arcs rising from her hair, subtly angled, catching the light like living ornaments. They moved slightly as she turned her head, an unconscious motion that made Marcus briefly wonder if they twitched when she was amused. She was looking directly at him. Marcus felt the specific terror of being noticed by someone who did not need to raise her voice to end civilizations. For a heartbeat, nothing happened. Then Selene lifted one hand and gestured, smooth and unhurried, to the seat beside her. Not a chair, a throne, or something functionally equivalent, grown from luminous material that pulsed faintly with internal light. It was empty. It had always been empty. Marcus knew, distantly, that it was not meant for someone like him. His brain, traitor that it was, interpreted the gesture as relief. "Oh, thank you," he said, far too loudly, already walking. The moment he sat, the hall changed. Marcus felt at first a subtle pressure shift, like stepping into a room where everyone had just stopped talking about you. Then the sound vanished entirely. Even the mist delegation seemed to hold itself still. Data screens flickered as aides across the chamber frantically checked cultural databases. Somewhere, something let out a distressed clicking noise. Marcus smiled weakly, then realized smiling might also mean something. He leaned toward Selene and whispered, "I'm very sorry I'm late." Her lips curved just slightly. "So I noticed." Her voice was calm, melodic, and carried without effort, though she had not raised it. Marcus swallowed. Up close, the differences became clearer. Her eyes reflected more light than human eyes should. Not glowing, just attentive. Her ears shifted again, a delicate adjustment, and he became acutely aware of how close they were sitting. Close enough that their sleeves brushed. Close enough that his chair adjusted itself automatically, aligning with hers as if proximity were expected. The summit resumed, but Marcus could feel the weight of attention pressing from all sides. As opening statements droned on, he tried to recall everything he knew about Kier customs. Unfortunately, most of what he knew involved trade law, not seating arrangements that apparently caused existential shockwaves. A small display bloomed in his peripheral vision, his assistant's emergency channel blinking furiously. He ignored it. Opening it would only confirm that something had gone terribly wrong, and he preferred the illusion that this was normal. Selene leaned closer, her voice low. "You seem uncomfortable." "I once spent 6 hours inside a malfunctioning stasis pod," Marcus murmured back. "This is worse." That earned him a soft exhale that might have been a laugh. Her ears tilted back a fraction, and he suspected that was significant. As the first speaker concluded, A reptilian delegate turned toward Marcus, stared for a long moment, then looked away as if burned. Marcus raised a hand in a tentative greeting. The delegate did not respond. He cleared his throat, then immediately regretted it as several translation matrices recalibrated. For the record, he said quietly to Selene, if I've broken a rule, I promise it was accidental. Selene's gaze remained forward, serene. Few things that matter are ever entirely accidental. Marcus stared at the hall, at the impossible geometry of the ceiling, at the galaxy quietly rearranging itself around a chair he had sat in, without thinking. Somewhere in the distance, he imagined historians warming up their footnotes. He had wanted a seat. He had not asked where it was. The silence did not break so much as it learned how to breathe again. Sound returned in layers. The low harmonic hum of the Concord Hall's environmental field. The faint whisper of translation engines recalibrating. The distant clicking of a species Marcus suspected communicated primarily through contractual disapproval. No one spoke directly to him, yet everything seemed to be speaking about him. Marcus became intensely aware of his posture. He adjusted once, then froze, uncertain whether adjusting twice would imply confidence, intimacy, or a declaration of war. The seat beneath him responded anyway, subtly reshaping to maintain alignment with Selene's throne. He had the unsettling sensation that the furniture itself approved of this arrangement. A small icon blinked insistently in his vision again. He sighed and finally opened the channel. "Marcus!" his aide hissed, her voice compressed into a whisper so aggressive it might have bent light. "Why are you there?" "Because I was invited?" he whispered back, though even to his own ears it sounded unconvincing. "That seat is—" She paused, clearly restraining language that would not survive archival review. "That seat is not for negotiators." "Well," Marcus said, glancing at Selene, who was listening to the current speaker with regal focus, "it's very comfortable." The aide made a sound like someone discovering a structural flaw in reality. The channel cut abruptly, either by her choice or by an emergency override designed to prevent diplomatic heart attacks. The speaker on the floor, a tall, crystalline being whose facets shifted color with emphasis, finished a statement on tariff harmonization. Applause followed, polite and algorithmically precise. Marcus joined in a half-second late, then stopped clapping when he realized Selene was not clapping at all. He folded his hands instead, hoping that conveyed wisdom. She leaned toward him again. "You do not clap when Kir rulers preside." "I don't clap when humans preside either," Marcus said. "It's just usually implied." This time she did smile briefly, and one of her ears flicked in a way that felt dangerously approving. As discussion moved on, Marcus noticed patterns. Delegates addressed Selene with deference, but now they also acknowledged him indirectly. Statements included phrases like, "with respect to current alignments and given recent symbolic developments." One aquatic envoy bowed slightly in his direction before speaking, sloshing decorously. He leaned closer to Selene. "I think they think we're something." "They think many things," she replied, "most of them incorrect." "That's comforting." "It should not be." During a recess, attendants glided forward with refreshment units adapted for 100 biochemistries. Marcus reached for a cup, then hesitated. Selene's hand moved first, selecting a vessel that shimmered faintly before solidifying. Only after she had taken a sip did Marcus realize several delegates were watching the timing with alarming intensity. He picked up his cup. Nothing exploded. This felt like a success. The liquid tasted like citrus and static electricity. He swallowed bravely. "You are calm," Selene said. "I am very good at appearing calm," Marcus said. "Inside, I'm assembling a list of apologies that may take years to deliver." She turned her head slightly, studying him. Up close, her long ears angled forward, attentive. "You walked into this hall late, without allies, without preparation, and sat beside me without asking why. That is not calm. That is interesting." Marcus nearly choked on his drink. "I promise you, Empress, there was no strategy involved. If there had been, it would have failed much more spectacularly." A low ripple of sound moved through the hall as delegates repositioned. The atmosphere felt tighter now, as if invisible lines had been redrawn. Marcus felt the pressure, the expectation, the unspoken narrative forming around him like an eager crowd. A message flashed across the central display, announcing the next agenda item, Kier Dominion Trade Access Proposal. Marcus stiffened. He had read the briefings. The proposal was controversial to the point of volatility. Opening Kier space meant redrawing centuries of controlled isolation. He glanced at Solène, whose expression had not changed, though her ears had shifted back slightly. "This is the part where things become energetic," she said quietly. "That's one word for it." The debate began. Questions flew, sharp and precise. Concerns about sovereignty, about precedent, about what it meant when a dominion known for strict internal cohesion invited external influence. Several speakers glanced at Marcus as they spoke, as if his presence alone was evidence. He leaned in. "Am I supposed to say something?" "Not yet," Solène replied. "But you will." "Of course I will." As arguments escalated, Marcus found himself oddly grounded by the absurdity of his situation. He was still late. He was still underdressed for history. Somewhere, Earth's diplomatic corps was probably preparing a collective scream. And yet, seated beside an empress with long ears and unreadable intentions, he felt the unmistakable sense that this was not a mistake being corrected. It was a door that had already closed behind him. The recess was announced with a tone that vibrated through Marcus's bones, a polite reminder from the Concord Hall that organic beings required pauses even when history was inconvenient. Delegates began to disperse in carefully choreographed paths, some gliding, some rolling, some dissolving briefly into other states of matter before reforming near exits. Marcus stayed seated for half a second too long, uncertain whether standing before Solène would be interpreted as independence or abandonment. The chair made the decision for him, easing him upright the moment Solène arose. That did not help his nerves. "Walk with me," she said, already moving. It was not phrased as a command, which somehow made it more dangerous. Marcus fell into step beside her, acutely aware that their pace matched without effort. The Kier delegation wing unfolded ahead of them, sealed off from the main hall by a membrane of shifting light that parted at Solène's approach. As they crossed the threshold, gravity adjusted subtly, smoothing Marcus's stride as if the floor itself were invested in his dignity. "Your architecture cheats," he said, gesturing around as walls rearranged themselves into a long corridor lined with softly glowing panels. "It cooperates," Solène replied. "There is a difference." The corridor emitted a faint harmonic resonance, a low chord that seemed to hum just below conscious hearing. Marcus felt his pulse slow despite himself. "Is this some kind of calming field?" "Yes." "Good," he said, "because if I don't calm down soon, I'm going to apologize to a wall." She glanced at him, one ear tilted, a movement he was beginning to associate with restrained amusement. "You apologize frequently. It's a human survival trait." They walked in silence for a few moments, the sound of their steps absorbed by the adaptive flooring. When Solène spoke again, her tone was lighter, almost conversational. "Do you know what it means, in Kier custom, to share a seat with a ruler during deliberation?" Marcus exhaled slowly. "I know that several people looked like they were reconsidering their life choices." "It signifies trust," she continued. "Alignment. In some eras, intent." "In my defense," Marcus said, "my intent was not to stand forever. I am aware." They entered a chamber that opened outward rather than inward, revealing a vast viewport. Beyond it, space curved unnaturally. The Concord station anchored at a point where several trade corridors intersected. Ships drifted like punctuation marks in an unfinished sentence. Solène stopped near the viewport. Marcus followed, then hesitated, suddenly aware of how alone they were. The calming field intensified, the hum deepening. "You chose that seat," he said finally. "Yes." "I didn't," he added, just to be clear. She turned to face him fully. Up close, without the weight of an audience, her presence felt different. Still powerful, but more focused, like a blade not currently in motion. Her long ears angled slightly outward, relaxed. "I required a signal," she said, "one that could not be dismissed as internal maneuvering." Marcus frowned. "You could have signaled a dozen ways. You're an empress." "And every one of those ways would have been predictable," Solène replied. "Predictability is a weakness when you are proposing change." So you picked the late human, Marcus said. No offense, but that feels optimistic. That you were late was unfortunate, she said. That you came anyway was useful. Marcus laughed despite himself, a short sound that echoed faintly. This is the part where you tell me I was observed long before today, isn't it? Yes. There it is. She gestured, and a holographic lattice bloomed between them, displaying shifting data streams. Trade flows, population gradients, political fault lines rendered in elegant Kier script and universally translated overlays. My people are divided, Solène said. The core systems cling to isolation. The outer systems see stagnation. Opening Kier space will provoke resistance, not only from within, but from those who benefit from our current opacity. Marcus studied the display, and a human beside you makes it harder to call this a Kier-only rebellion. It reframes it, she said, as evolution. He looked at her. You realize they think we're courting. Her lips curved faintly. They think many things. That didn't deny it. Her ears shifted back, then forward again. Kier bonds are not impulsive. Proximity is only the beginning. Meaning is constructed over time. Great, Marcus said. So I've accidentally started a long-term process. Yes, he rubbed his face. I'm going to need a manual. You will adapt, Solène said. Humans are known for this. They stood there, the galaxy slowly rotating beyond the viewport. Marcus felt the weight of what she was asking without her having asked it yet. And if I say no, he asked, then you will return to your seat, she replied calmly. The signal will fade. I will find another path, but it will be harder. Yes, Marcus sighed. You know, where I'm from, we usually ease people into this kind of thing. Maybe start with coffee. What is coffee? A cultural hazard. She considered this. Perhaps you will explain it to me. He met her gaze, the unspoken future pressing gently but insistently between them. Perhaps, he said, surprised to find he meant it. Somewhere beyond the viewport, a ship jumped to light. The hum of the chamber deepened, steady and patient, as if it had all the time in the universe. By the time they returned to the main hall, the atmosphere had changed in a way Marcus could not have quantified but felt anyway. Like stepping back into a room where an argument had been paused rather than ended. Conversation softened and then stopped as Solène took her seat again, and Marcus, having learned nothing and everything at once, sat beside her without hesitation. This time, the silence that followed felt less like shock and more like confirmation. The debate resumed with renewed intensity. A delegation of joint symbiotes raised concerns about corridor contamination. An avian representative questioned jurisdictional overlap with the delicacy of someone sharpening a blade. Through it all, Solène listened, composed, her long ears shifting almost imperceptibly with each speaker. Marcus watched them more than he watched the speakers now, beginning to recognize patterns. Forward meant interest. Angled meant restraint. Flattened meant something he was fairly certain would shorten someone's lifespan. At one point, a delegate addressed Marcus directly. Human negotiator, the voice translated, carrying the faint echo of multiple throats speaking in consensus. You occupy a position of unusual proximity. Clarify your function. Marcus blinked. Several hundred beings focused on him again. He leaned toward Solène. Is this one of those moments? Yes, she said. Do I bow? Stand? Confess ignorance? Speak. Marcus straightened. My function, he said slowly, is trade facilitation. Also, apparently, furniture utilization. There was a pause, then, unexpectedly, a ripple of amusement moved through the chamber. Not laughter exactly, but a loosening. Marcus allowed himself a small smile. I am here, he continued, because I was late. I stayed because I was invited. Beyond that, I am listening. Solène inclined her head, a subtle acknowledgement. The delegate regarded him for a moment longer, then turned away, apparently satisfied or at least unwilling to pursue the matter further. You handled that well, Solène murmured. I didn't say anything useful. Usefulness is not always efficiency, she replied. Sometimes it is disruption. The discussion shifted to legal frameworks. Marcus recognized the trap forming as it always did. Language precise enough to exclude, without appearing hostile. He leaned back slightly, listening, then leaned forward again without thinking. "May I ask a question?" he said. Several delegates stiffened. Solène did not stop him. "If Kier's space opens," Marcus said, "what happens to disputes that don't fit existing categories? The ones that fall between species law, trade law, and frankly, common sense?" A murmur spread. Selene's ear flicked toward him, sharp and quick. "That," said a gelatinous envoy, "is precisely the concern." "Right," Marcus said, "but concern isn't a plan. Humans tried avoiding those kinds of problems once. It didn't work. We invented committees instead." "What is a committee?" someone asked. "A mistake," Marcus said promptly, "but a useful one." Solène's lips curved, and for a moment the tension eased again. The debate turned, not resolved but redirected. Marcus felt something settle into place, an unspoken role he had not applied for, but was now occupying. As the session wore on, he noticed the strain beneath Solène's calm. When opposition sharpened, her ears angled back more often. When allies spoke, they relaxed. He found himself adjusting his posture to match hers, not because he knew why, but because it felt instinctively right. Once, and when a particularly pointed accusation was leveled at her, he leaned forward slightly, an unconscious gesture of solidarity. The reaction was immediate. Data streams spiked. A few delegates glanced at each other with expressions that translated loosely as, "Oh no." Solène did not look at him, but her voice softened. "You need not do that." "I know," Marcus said quietly, but it felt rude not to. That earned him a breath of laughter, quick and controlled. Her ear brushed his sleeve. The session ended without resolution, which everyone agreed was progress. As delegates filed out, Marcus remained seated for a moment, staring at the space where the arguments had hung. "You are adapting," Solène said. "I'm improvising," he replied. "There's a difference." She rose and he followed, the hall already buzzing with speculation. As they walked, Marcus caught fragments of whispered analysis, probability forecasts recalculating futures that now inconveniently included him. "Just so we're clear," he said under his breath, "I didn't plan to become a variable." Solène glanced at him, her gaze steady. "Neither did I." They exited the hall together, the doors sealing behind them, leaving the galaxy to argue about what they had just seen. The fifth session began without ceremony and with entirely too much confidence, which Marcus had learned was the clearest sign that something dangerous was about to happen. The Concord Hall adjusted its lighting to a sharper spectrum, the kind reserved for legal debate and polite intellectual combat. Marcus took a seat beside Solène, with the practiced ease of someone who had accepted that reality had already given up on subtlety. This time, no silence followed. The delegates merely noted the arrangement, logged it, and prepared their arguments like physicians washing hands before surgery. Progress, apparently. A Kier noble faction representative spoke first. Their avatar manifested as a tall, angular figure, wrapped in shifting sigils of lineage and authority. The voice carried layered harmonics, ancient and deliberate. "Empress Solène," the figure intoned, "your proposal continues to fracture internal consensus. External influence is accelerating that fracture." Solène inclined her head. "Consensus is not the same as unity." Marcus leaned closer, whispering, "That's going on a plaque somewhere." Her ear tilted back briefly. He decided that meant amusement under pressure. The representative's gaze slid to Marcus. "And yet you persist in maintaining proximity to a non-Kier negotiator during proceedings of existential importance." Marcus smiled politely. "I persist in sitting." A few delegates shifted, uncertain whether this was defiance or stupidity. Solène spoke before the tension could harden. "He is here by my will," she said. "As are you." The hall responded with a low, harmonic acknowledgement, its systems recording the statement as binding. Marcus felt the weight of it settle in his chest. Will, not convenience, not accident. The debate escalated. Arguments overlapped now, projections intersecting mid-air like hostile weather systems. Data models clashed, recalculating futures in real time. Marcus watched entire potential centuries collapse into revised footnotes as probabilities adjusted around Solène's plan. He had never seen policy move this fast. It was terrifying and, against his better judgment, Fascinating. At one point, a delegate from a mineral-based collective addressed Marcus again. You are a variable without lineage claim, the translation rendered. Your presence destabilizes precedent. Marcus considered that. Yes, he said, that's sort of our brand. A ripple moved through the chamber. Not laughter, but recognition. Humans had a reputation. Not always flattering, but consistent. Selene leaned toward him. You are making this easier. I don't know how, he whispered back. Neither do they, she replied. That unsettles them. As the hours wore on, the pressure mounted. Kir traditionalists sharpened their rhetoric, no longer questioning the proposal alone, but Selene's authority to enact it. Her posture remained composed, but Marcus noticed the subtle signs now. The way her ears flattened when a particular name was invoked, the way her fingers rested against the armrest. Tension held but controlled. During a brief suspension, the hall dimmed, signaling a recalibration window. Marcus did not wait for invitation this time. You're under attack, he said quietly. Yes. They're not just debating policy. No. He hesitated, then spoke anyway. You could pull back. Frame this as exploratory. Save face. Selene turned to him fully. Her gaze was steady, but there was something raw beneath it now, exposed only because no one else was looking. If I pull back, she said, the opportunity closes. Fear will claim victory and call it tradition. Marcus nodded slowly. I was hoping you wouldn't say that. Why? Because it means you're serious. Her lips curved, not in humor this time, but resolve. I always am. The session resumed. This time the challenge was direct. A Kir elder rose, their presence commanding immediate attention. Their ears bore ceremonial markings Marcus did not recognize but instinctively knew carried weight. You ask the Dominion to change, the elder said, yet you anchor that change to an outsider. Explain this contradiction. Selene did not answer immediately. She looked at Marcus. The pause was brief. It felt infinite. He leaned forward before fear could stop him. She's not anchoring change to me, Marcus said. She's anchoring it to accountability. The hall stilled. I can leave, he continued. Any human can. Any ally can. That's the point. What she's proposing can't rely on bloodlines alone. It has to survive scrutiny, even mine. Selene's ear brushed his arm again, firmer this time. The elder regarded him for a long moment. You speak boldly for one without claim. Marcus shrugged. I was late. I'm compensating. A few delegates emitted sounds that the translation rendered as amusement. Tension eased just enough. The vote was deferred. Not denied, deferred. In Concord terms, that was momentum. When the hall finally adjourned, Marcus felt the exhaustion hit him all at once. He remained seated as delegates departed, the echoes of their speculation fading into background noise. You placed yourself in danger, Selene said softly. I noticed, Marcus replied. I assume that's normal around you. Her gaze lingered on him. You could still step away. He met her eyes. You could stop asking. She considered that, then nodded once. Very well. They rose together, no longer as anomaly, but as something newly defined. Whatever the galaxy decided to call it would come later. For now it was enough that the future had not closed its doors. Marcus exhaled as they walked out. You know, he said, back home, this would qualify as a very bad meeting. Selene's ears tilted forward. Then your standards are unambitious. He laughed, and for the first time that day, it came easily. By the 6th day of deliberations, Marcus had learned 3 things with absolute certainty. First, the Concord Hall never truly slept. It merely dimmed itself and judged silently. Second, Kir politics were less rigid than rumored and far more sharp-edged. Third, once you accidentally became a symbol, people stopped asking whether you wanted to be one. He took his seat beside Selene before anyone else could make a point of noticing. The throne adjusted, lights aligning, fields synchronizing, the furniture once again conspiring against plausible deniability. Across the chamber, probability models bloomed and collapsed like anxious flowers. Today's agenda carried a new gravity. The vote would not be final, but it would be decisive. The sort of decision that rearranged footnotes into headlines. Selene sat perfectly still, her posture calm, her long ears angled in a neutral position that Marcus had learned meant readiness without invitation. He leaned toward her, lowering his voice. "If this goes badly," he said, "I want it on record that I am very good at running." "I am aware," she replied. "I have observed humans." That earned him a smile he did not return. He watched the delegates instead. Something had shifted overnight. Alliances sat closer together. A few representatives who had once avoided looking at him now did so openly, assessing, recalculating. The Kir traditionalists had consolidated. Their avatars carried heavier ornamentation, signaling unified resistance. The session opened with a challenge, not a question. "Empress Solène," said a coalition speaker, their voice harmonized into something almost musical. "Your proposal has altered the balance of this summit, not through content, but through implication." Solène inclined her head. "Implication is a form of content. The presence beside you," the speaker continued, "has transformed procedural debate into spectacle." Marcus sighed quietly. "I really should start charging admission." Solène's ear flicked. The hall did not miss it. "The spectacle," the speaker said, "suggests intent." "Yes," Solène replied evenly. "It does." That single word rippled outward, destabilizing half a dozen predictive models. Marcus felt it like a pressure drop. The questioning intensified, not just of policy now, but of Solène herself, her right to reinterpret Kir tradition, her authority to bind future rulers to precedent. The stakes sharpened until the air felt thin. Marcus waited. He had learned restraint the hard way. When he finally spoke, it was not to argue law. "You're afraid," he said. Several delegates reacted at once. Shock, offense, interest. "Change always looks like loss from the inside," he continued. "Trust me, humans have been doing it to ourselves for centuries. We argue about borders, identity, who gets to sit where. Sometimes we get it wrong. Often, but when we don't try, we stagnate." A projection flared, displaying comparative stagnation indices. Someone had cued the data before he finished speaking. Solène turned slightly toward him, her ear brushing his sleeve again. Not by accident this time. The opposition pressed harder. Accusations of manipulation surfaced, of theater, of calculated intimacy. Marcus let them talk. He noticed something else instead. The undecided delegates, those watching Solène's reactions, watching him. When the pressure peaked, Solène rose. The hall recalibrated instantly, gravity shifting to center her. She did not raise her voice. "You question my intent," she said. "Very well, I will clarify it." She gestured, and the chamber filled with Kir history, not propaganda, but raw data. Trade blockades, cultural bottlenecks, systems that had once thrived and now merely endured. "I seek continuity," she said, "not preservation. Continuity requires adaptation." Her gaze moved deliberately to Marcus. "I chose a human not because he is human," she continued, "but because he is temporary." The word landed heavily. "He does not inherit my authority. He cannot claim my throne. He can leave. That is precisely why this matters. What we build must stand without blood." Silence followed. Not shock this time. Consideration. Marcus felt something settle in his chest, a mix of relief and responsibility. He leaned forward, just slightly, and stayed there. The vote began. Lights shifted. Signals pulsed. Delegates committed positions in cascading waves. Marcus watched the tally climb, stall, teeter, deferred, approved, contested. Not enough. Then a minor block shifted, then another. The balance tipped, not into victory, but into viability. The session adjourned amid controlled chaos. In the aftermath, Marcus remained seated, suddenly exhausted. Solène did not move immediately. When she did, she turned to him. "You remained," she said. "I said I would," he replied. "Eventually. I just didn't specify when." Her lips curved, a real smile this time. "You are learning Kir timing." As they left the hall together, the whispers followed them. No longer confused, no longer shocked, deliberate. Marcus exhaled. "So," he said, "on a scale from minor disruption to historic catastrophe, where are we?" Solène considered this. "Evolution," she said, "with complications." Of course, Marcus said. It wouldn't be us otherwise. They walked on, the future no longer hypothetical, but inconveniently present. The Concord Hall did not announce the end of history. It never did. It simply dimmed its lights to a neutral spectrum and released the delegates in carefully timed waves, as if aware that too much revelation at once could be hazardous to most forms of life. Marcus stayed seated longer than necessary. The chair no longer tried to adjust him. Whatever algorithms had once buzzed with significance now seemed content to wait, as if the furniture itself understood that this moment belonged to the people sitting in it rather than the rules that had built it. Around them, aides hurried, probability models dissolved, and ships beyond the great viewport began to realign their jump vectors. The galaxy was already moving on, which Marcus suspected was the closest thing it had to applause. "So," he said at last, breaking the silence, "did we just quietly rewrite interstellar law?" Solène did not answer immediately. She watched the hall empty, her long ears relaxed for the first time since he had met her. Without an audience, without resistance pressing against her calm, she looked lighter. "Quietly is relative," she said. "But yes, we opened the door. And nobody exploded," Marcus added, "which I consider a success." She turned toward him, studying his face with an expression that was no longer evaluative, no longer political. "You speak as though you expected otherwise." "I prepare emotionally for explosions," he said. "It's a coping strategy." That earned him a soft laugh, unrestrained this time. The sound echoed faintly in the vast chamber, and for a moment it felt as though the hall itself approved. They rose together, not in unison, but without hesitation. No signals flared, no whispers surged. The meaning had already been decided. Outside the hall, the corridor opened into the transit atrium, where representatives waited with varying degrees of satisfaction, resentment, and poorly concealed curiosity. A Kir traditionalist inclined their head towards Solène, respectful, if not warm. A human aide stared at Marcus as if trying to determine when exactly he had stopped being a liability and become something else. He caught his reflection in a polished surface and paused. He looked the same, slightly more tired perhaps, slightly less uncertain. "That's disappointing," he muttered. Solène glanced at him. "What is?" "I was hoping I'd look wiser. Or taller." "Growth is not always visible," she said. "Among the Kir, it is considered suspicious if it is." They walked toward a quieter wing, away from the currents of departing influence. Marcus knew distantly that a decision waited there. He felt no urgency to reach it. "You know," he said, "I could still leave." "Yes," Solène replied. "You have always been able to. And if I stay," he continued, "I won't be a ruler. I won't be Kir. I'll be a Russia adjacent." She stopped walking and turned to face him fully, her ears angled forward, attentive, open. "You will be accountable," she said. "To me, to them, to yourself." Marcus considered that. The old version of him, the one who apologized to doors and furniture, might have laughed it off, might have deflected. Instead, he nodded. "I can do accountable," he said. "I've been practicing." Solène studied him for a long moment, then inclined her head, not as an empress, as a partner. They continued on, passing into a chamber where the noise of the summit faded entirely. Beyond a wide viewport, Kir space unfolded, no longer sealed, no longer singular, but open, threaded with new routes that glowed faintly as they initialized. "It won't be easy," Marcus said. "No," Solène agreed. "They'll challenge you. Challenge us." "Yes. And someone will write very unflattering analyses about my posture." Her ears flicked. "I will ensure they are historically inaccurate." Marcus laughed, the sound carrying freely now. "I was late to a meeting," he said, almost to himself. "That's how this started." Solène's gaze followed the newly lit trade corridors, her expression thoughtful. "Many revolutions begin with inconvenience." They stood together, not framed by ceremony, not watched by an audience, but positioned nonetheless at the edge of something irrevocable. Marcus felt the weight of it, steady and real, and found that it no longer frightened him. For the first time in his career, he did not reach for an apology. Instead, he reached for the future and stayed where he was,